Welcome back to the Big Fish Little Fish podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Teo DeBress. And, the world hasn't actually changed all that much since the last time we potted. It's been a few weeks now since our last pod, but we're here to kind of talk about some of the incoming, ongoing changes, some bold predictions we have for 2025, as well as our thoughts to some foreign matters going on in the world, some foreign conflicts, as well as reviewing some recent moves by our world's most richest man, or at least the U.S. United States. Is it world? Okay. World. Richest guy in the world. You can guess who I'm talking about. Not very hard to guess. So anyways, Teo, Department of Government Efficiency, also known as Doge, also is kind of a play on words with Dogecoin, the cryptocurrency. For any of those who, for whatever reason, don't know, it's also a crypto coin. But, Teo, tell us some of your thoughts about the Department of Government Efficiency.
It's an interesting concept that's being proposed, which is, I think everyone knew that with a change in administrations, we were going to have different policies being introduced immediately. And I think one of the big ones that has been discussed is addressing a lot of components about the government. And I think that could be seen on a bunch of different facets, from how the government's operating, the size of the government, who's really in charge of the government, how big the staff of the government should be. They're kind of looking at it all. And I think that part of the rhetoric around it has been the government has a fair amount of the big three that's always talked about: fraud, waste, and abuse. Those are things that we always are supposed to be holding our government accountable against. Is there levels of fraud, waste, and abuse happening in there? And I think that there is definitely a portion of the country, if not all of the country, who would say that our government's not operating very effectively or efficiently right now. I would say that, generally speaking, both sides feel that way. I think the interesting thing is, when you look at it, one side wants to, even though that's happening, they want to continue making sure that there are government programs in place that are providing the services that are needed. And the other side is saying, hey, it's inefficient, it's not operating well, we don't need as much of it in general. That's kind of how I've seen the two sides looking at it. They both agree that it may not be operating at the best way possible, but what they see as the appropriate next steps, that's where the difference begins. One side wants to, I guess, correct it, but also continue growing it so that it does more for the people. And the other side is saying, hey, let's correct it by reducing the influence and presence of it in our lives. We don't really need it anyway. It's wasteful of our money. And ultimately, I think when you have the switch in administrations, what you're going to see is a change in that, where now we have a side coming in that's saying, hey, we are of the school of thought that this is a big bloated government that's not operating very effectively or efficiently, and one of their proposed solutions is, let's create a whole new department to address the government efficiency. Now, part of me thinks that's ironic, that the solution for too big of a government is to create a new department of the government. I do think there's some irony in that, but on the other side, I do think that it seems like there is no way to get around this than to, if you want to reduce a lot of those components of fraud, waste, and abuse, you have to be very critical and make some really difficult decisions to get to the point where you can actually start making a measurable change. I have spent a fair amount of time when my early start of my career in consulting, and I got to see multiple government organizations kind of from the inside, from a consulting perspective. That's the interesting thing, is you do get to see behind the curtain, and you're actually supporting the government in their processes. And I have to say, personally speaking, I do think that I personally saw a lot of inefficiency and waste going on in our government agencies from the levels I was seeing it at. There were a lot of staff who were not very effective, who weren't taking the job very seriously. They're the definition of what I call a government employee, where they would definitely be there when they need to clock in, but they were clocking out the second that their hours were done, and they were there to fulfill the requirement of, I'm a government employee, I do these things. It's not like it's my life is on the line or this is my passion. I'm doing this because of the stability and security of the job, and it pays a cushy salary, it has great benefits, and I will do the honestly the bare minimum of what's needed for me to execute my job. So on one hand, I gotta say I kind of agree. I think that when I look at a lot of our government organizations, I do see something has to change. We have a large workforce of people who are employed by the federal government who aren't operating at a high level, and we're trusting them with our taxpayer dollars to get this done. And if that's the case, something needs to change. We're spending too much money, it's growing every year, and it's not doing a better job in the services it's providing. So where does it end? If we continued on this current path, I just think government keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it doesn't seem like they're addressing more and more and more. I think we're all looking around as Americans these days and saying, whatever they're tasked with doing, they're not doing a very good job of it. So all that being said, it's a long-winded way of saying I think that there is some change that's needed. Now, the things being proposed in the government efficiency organization is that they'd axe entire actual departments and they're going to reduce 50% of the workforce. That, I think, is an interesting experiment. How that's going to operate, though I agree change is needed, how that's going to be implemented and how that's going to operate, if it's even possible with our current system and how litigious our country is, I don't know if that's even going to happen. So what are your thoughts? First of all, do you think that it's a necessary organization? And then do you think it even can do what they're saying they're going to do?
Is it necessary? Honestly, I don't know. Like you, I think something has to be done to address the deficit and fraud, waste, and abuse within the current federal system. And I guess how I've kind of looked at it is only one or two things I feel like is going to happen. Or I guess a range of two scenarios. Scenario A, which is the best case scenario. Scenario A is the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, actually decreases the deficit and cuts a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse, and really dwindles the amount of spending the federal government does on all these employees of the federal government that are not as efficient as they could be. So that's A, right? That would be the best case scenario, and it actually cuts down the deficit, and it actually stops the rabid debt of the United States of America. Or option B, which would be we just created another department in the government that's going to become an inflated bureaucratic government, and it's going to work as another quote unquote auditor, right? Because some of these departments, they're kind of in some ways like auditors. There's the IRS, which audits Americans, right? There's the Inspector General, which is supposed to be, I think in some ways, kind of what DOGE already does, right? The Inspector General is supposed to be making sure like all the departments are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be investigating or auditing for compliance of different things. So I don't know. I would assume they're going to look into the Inspector General as well, the Office of Inspector General. And I think there's going to be a lot of, I don't know, just assessing all these organizations. There's 400 plus government organizations. That's a lot. And I don't know all 400. I don't know if anyone knows all 400 agencies. And then let's say you did know them. Do you really understand what they do? I find it hard to imagine at the federal level. It's absolutely necessary to have 400 agencies and they don't kind of intermingle in their responsibilities and duties. So if the Department of Government Efficiency doesn't actually do what they say they're going to do, they're just going to end up another bloated agency that's spending and wasting tax dollars. It may even intersect with some of the other agencies that quote unquote do some form of auditing, right? Because that's kind of what these government agencies do. Some of these government agencies do is they make sure that other agencies or other entities are compliant to government standards. So that's kind of my two thoughts on where the Department of Government Efficiency is going to go. And I think I'm not saying this is necessarily a foreshadowing of things to come, but I will say the fact that Vivek and Elon Musk are tasked with co-running this isn't very efficient for a Department of Government efficiency. I would say that's kind of inefficient. Usually with organizations, there is a structure of like a clear head of something, and it doesn't seem too clear who is going to be running this thing.
Yeah. I don't know how they're going to structure it. They're standing up something new. I know that the last time Trump was in the administration, he started the Space Defense Agency, and that was new, and he introduced a new organization there. And now he's doing the second organization I know he's creating, which is now the Department of Government Efficiency. So I don't know how he's going to have it structured, and I don't know how with two individuals like Vivek and Elon Musk, especially with all the stuff Elon Musk is doing, how much time is he allocating to this? And we can probably talk about this as the next segment, but that's another thing that we'd have to talk about. But I guess I don't know what the Department of Government Efficiency is going to be looking like, how it's going to be structured, or what they're going to do. But if I was running the Department of Government Efficiency, this is how I would go about it. There's three things I would focus on. One, when you're looking at organizations, is the organization in the government necessary? First and foremost, do we even need it? Is it actually something that was created to serve a need, and do we still need to serve that need? That's like check the box number one. Number two, is it operating effectively? Is it something that is actually fulfilling on the purpose that it was created to do, and is it doing it in an effective manner? So are they being able to address the needs that whatever they've been tasked with doing in a way that is using every dollar to the best manner possible? Are they actually maximizing the ROI on the dollars? And I think that's the problem with the government sometimes, is they're not a business, so they don't look at the money the same way because they know that Congress is going to keep just giving them money. And if they spend it, then they can ask Congress for more. And if they don't, then they're going to lose it. So they just spend money just to make sure they're maintaining their budget. But I think when you're a private corporation, you look at every single dollar you spend and saying, is that going to give me a return on my investment? Is my ROI actually coming from whatever I'm spending my money on? Whether that's a research and development thing, whether that's a marketing thing, whether that's your workforce and your staff, every dollar is being analyzed from a budgetary standpoint to say, is this making my company either more profitable or more successful? The problem is the government isn't a business, so they don't look at it like that, so they don't treat money the same way. The even bigger problem is the money they're using is not the government's money, it's our money. So it's almost like twice as bad when the government's inefficient, because at least if a company is inefficient, whoever the business owner is just isn't a good job running their business, but it's usually their money on the line. Or they at least have collateral. They're leveraging it with the bank where they're saying, hey, I'm taking out this debt and putting my name as collateral against it. The problem with the government is they're taking our money, the U.S. taxpayers' money, and they're treating it with no focus on, is this the best way I'm using our money? They're bloated big government organizations, and they just expect this money to be given to them. It's like, hey, well, the government's going to keep funding me because Congress is going to keep funding these bills, and Congress is like, hey, well, I'm not worried about if I'm using taxpayer dollars effectively because I just need to get reelected, so I'm just going to do that. So it's kind of like a trickle-down effect of no one actually values the U.S. taxpayers' money as much as they should. And at a certain point, I think that's all on us as American citizens to say something about it. If the government is going to continue not using our money effectively, it's our responsibility to speak up and say, hey, that's our money. Use it better. We're not happy with the level of service that's being provided by this. It's not just a given that we're going to keep being given these money at these organizations. That mentality needs to change with the government, that though you are not a private corporation, the money you're spending needs to be treated with a level of dignity and respect as if it was your own money, because it kind of is. It's all of our money that these government organizations are spending, and are they spending it effectively? And then the last thing I'd say, the third thing is the workforce as big as it needs to be? And that could go either way. Do we have enough staff on this workforce that is making it so it's actually achievable to do it? Or do we have too much staff on this workforce for whatever the organization is? And we could actually cut down and get the same level of productivity with less people. And I think that ties into the last problem I'll say about our government system is, why do we have a government where it's impossible to get fired? I know that there's been some laws passed that's made it that way, but honestly speaking, why is the assumption once you're hired as a government employee, basically no matter what you do, you can't be fired? I unequivocally disagree with that concept. I actually think it should be more stringent of a hiring process to get hired into the government. And then once you're there, you need to be operating at a high level to maintain your job because you are using our money as taxpayers for your employment. And if that's the case, you need to have the highest level of standard. Not only should it be hard to not get fired, it should be something where you are constantly having to prove yourself. There are performance metrics you're using as a government employee that means you're going to be doing a great and effective job with our taxpayer dollars. Otherwise, we'll replace you. That concept, I think, is bigger than all the other problems that's been talked about. The easiest way, in my mind, to fix our government bloating and our government inefficiencies is to start making our government employees extremely accountable to their level of productivity. If we switch that around so that the government no longer made it impossible to get fired, but actually made it where if you're not operating at the high level, you're removed from that organization, I think that we'd see a very different workforce in our government. And again, tying it back from my time to when I was in consulting, kind of got to peek behind the window, I would say that 10 to 15% of the government workforce was doing 80% of the job. There are some government employees who take their job extremely serious and take the actual task that's been given to their organization extremely serious, and that mission statement of that organization they take to heart. And then the last 85% is like slacking off on the job. So it's 15% of our government workforce who feels like they're doing 100% of the work or 85% of the work. That is the cleanest way for me. If I was running the Department of Government Efficiency, I would say rule number one is we are no longer making it easy to not get fired. You are going to be held against extremely high performance metrics, and you got one shot to stay at your organization, and if not, you're fired.
Yep. I could see that. It'd be very interesting to see how to implement those things. But I could see that. I could see your opinion on that. I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. It's just how to implement those things. And I think with the Department of Government Efficiency, one of the things that I believe is one of the issues with, I guess it would also tie into a little bit of what you're saying, is like, I see what you're saying. Like, they need to be held to a higher standard. They need to prove their productivity. Excuse me. But you don't know how you would do that in this moment. Exactly, right? And I would say that Elon and Vivek, if they have a plan, I don't think it's been super clear or made super clear to the public with how they are going to cut inefficient workers. Like, I've just heard we're going to cut inefficiency. We're going to get rid of agencies. But to my understanding, there has to be congressional approval, and there's going to be a lot of litigation. And a lot of these people have, like, there's unions, there's federal government workers that are in unions that preserve their jobs. There's also going to be a lot of backlash. So just trying to get rid of whole departments. And as here's the thing in politics, right? Because it's not just the Republican Party that does it; it's the Democrat Party. It's all political, but all political parties, they love to say nice things to get their bases excited. They like to say things that sounds good on the campaign trail, but how do you actually enact these policies or these ideas is a completely different animal. So, for example, to my understanding, to actually get rid of an organization, I believe you need 60 votes in the Senate to get rid of a department, right? Can you fact check me on that? How many votes do you need to get rid of a government agency? I believe it's 60 votes in the Senate. I'm not sure if you need House votes or how many that would be. But that being said, that is a tall feat in itself, because even on the Republican side, like, Republicans pretend like they want to be efficient, but they've had the opportunity just as well as Democrats to get things done, and they haven't, right? Because there's always infighting, even among one's own political party. And, you know, there's not just the swamp on the executive side that you have to fight. There's also the swamp on the congressional side that you have to fight. And to say that they don't have any ties to these, you know, departments of the government, I think we'd be a little bit surprised to see, when push comes to shove, how hesitant members in Congress will be to actually get rid of a government agency. So my thought is their whole plan and their whole slogan going to be ultimately like, oh, you know, we wanted to do it, but Congress wouldn't let us? Just like a lot of other things that didn't happen from 2016 to 2020 or 2020 to 2024, right? Every president, every administration, they have all these promises that they're saying, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, right? We're gonna build a wall, we're gonna get rid of student loan debt, you know, all these things that are promised. And then when push comes to shove to actually start cranking out these promises, they only get like 5 to 10% of what they say they're going to do. And they're like, Congress didn't let me. I would have loved to do those things, but my hands were tied. I couldn't do anything. So when I saw that, I was like, did we just make a new government in office for no reason? Did we just add to the bloating? You know? Because if that's the case, it doesn't matter who's running the Department of Government Efficiency. It's ultimately up to Congress. It doesn't matter. The only thing, to my understanding, they're really going to be able to do is audit. But there have been a lot of auditors all over the place. And if you know anything about auditing is a thing where they're looking into your books, they're looking into your emails maybe, and they're like, what did you do? And then if they catch you, they're like, hey, you messed up. Here's what you're going to do to be compliant. And the person's like, oh, okay, I'll do these things. You do the thing, you're compliant, we'll move forward. Everybody keeps the churn going. So I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering, right? Because when I first heard about this organization coming together, my thoughts were, oh, they're going to walk in and immediately eliminate like fraud, waste, and abuse. And I was like, damn, why haven't they done this before? But then when I recognized, oh, you may have to get through Congress, I'm like, oh, it's all bullshit. They're not doing anything. You know, I don't know how else you would do it. And that's why when I've been seeing, oh, we're going to cut all these things. And I saw Vivek saying, oh, we're going to start with getting rid of everybody who has like I think like an ID that ends in a even number.
I don't think that was
something
true.
Like that.
I think he was using a hypothetical.
I don't know how he's going to do it. But my thing is, I haven't heard a clear way these policies are going to get enacted that doesn't have to do with getting Congress to get on board. And Congress, getting them on board with even things they allegedly want to do is hard in itself. To get Congress on board to, yes, from the taxpayer and the citizen perspective of fraud, waste, and abuse and getting rid of the deficit, 100%, it's in the interest of Americans. But do they ever do things that are in the interest of Americans? I mean, they sent billions of dollars to Ukraine before they took care of Hawaii, or before they took care of East Palestine in Ohio, or before they took care of the hurricane victims. To think that now they're going to get it together and get rid of the deficit, and then like, what congressional party wants to have the hanging media disruption of you got rid of hundreds of thousands of jobs? You know, because that's the one thing I will say. Say what you want about the federal government employees. At the end of the day, they're going to lose jobs. People are going to lose their houses. Families are going to be torn together. I mean, we live near Washington, D.C. Everything around Washington, D.C., a lot of it comes from federal funds. They come from federal employees. So there will be disruption if these things actually come about. So does Congress really want to go through that? I don't know. Maybe they do. But I just don't see them get together to get anything done. And I haven't seen too many members in Congress say, hell yeah, I'm really excited to get behind this. I've seen a few. I haven't heard too much from anybody. I've seen a lot of silence. I've seen a lot of congressional people not say anything about this. So, I don't know. Just some thoughts that I've had as I've been monitoring this situation. And you know what? I could be completely wrong about this. And within 2025, they get rid of like half of the government agencies. Yeah. You know, that's what I'm seeing. But Eugene, do you have any info for me, brother?
Yeah, it says 60 was right. You said for the Senate, right?
For the Senate.
Yeah, 60.
Does it say anything for the House?
It says 218 out of 435 members.
So 218 out of 435 in the House to get rid of government agencies.
That's not that hard. That's 50%.
That's 50%. And then 60 out of 100 for the Senate.
Well,
but
for that one, it says, when they're trying to, when the minority party tries to block, or slow down, someone passing legislation, that's when there's 60 required. But normally it's 51 out of 100. So the majority.
Okay.
Maybe just stop a filibuster or something.
Yeah. So there's a few hoops.
Yeah.
There's a few hoops to jump through. But that being said, I think if we're going to rely on Congress, it's not as easy as a road as people think. And then you have to get it on the floor, and then you have to get it to actually be, up for a vote, which if you know anything about getting any bill passed through Congress, it's an uphill battle, even for things people want to get behind. Very, very rare cases you can fast line a bill through.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if I was running the Department of Government Efficiency,
tell me,
is the organization necessary? Is the organization effective? Is the organization overstaffed? Those are the three metrics I'd be measuring against. And the way that I would actually implement change is change the law so that government employees can get fired without all the major blowback and fallout that comes from it, and then have extremely high performance metrics that our government employees are held against. And if you're not, you get one shot. We're not coming in and we're not firing everyone immediately, but we're changing up the guidelines you're measured against. And if you are not performing at a high enough standard to match our performance metrics, you're gone. That's it. We're reducing the size of our organization because you've given us evidence that you are not an effective or mandatory part of this system processing. And I think you'd be surprised how many people would get actually fired and how the organization would continue to operate, if not operate more effectively, because you don't have people compensating for ineffective, lazy government employees.
Yeah, I hear you.
Anything else on that topic? No, I'm good.
I was going to say, I'm pretty good. I'm excited to talk about it again in a couple months.
Yeah, we can do an update. Once it gets started.
Listen, it's very well that they perform at a high level. You got a lot of people who've been very successful who want to get in there. But you know what's funny? Sometimes when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, that creates some inefficiency and some infighting, right? How ironic would it be if you just have Vivek and Elon Musk beefing hard about how to get rid of government agencies, and they just become a bureaucracy in itself?
Well, I agree with you. It's not a clear path forward. No. They're saying they're big promises. Let's see if they can fulfill them.
If it doesn't happen, it wouldn't be the first time that a campaign overpromised and underdelivered. And I promise you, it will not be the last.
That is true. All right, so next topic. We kind of approached on two. Do you want to talk about the guy who'd be implementing?
Yeah. You can chime in.
Yeah.
So here's what I'll say, and I'll just be honest about it with my loyal audience. I'm very much I've always been interested in Elon Musk, and for the most part, I like a lot of the success he's had, and I like the way that he thinks about achieving goals and trying to accomplish whatever he kind of sets out to do, or at least trying to do it, which is better than a lot of people. But I will say, in light of recent events, I'm a little bit concerned about Elon Musk. He was the richest guy in the world. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to become wealthy. And he's said many times, I actually believe him, I don't think he cares about being the richest person in the world. I think it's awesome. I think he thinks it's awesome to do it, but I don't think that's his number one goal in life. I mean, he's talked about how Warren Buffett is kind of just like if I remember correctly, he was just like, Warren Buffett, he made a lot of money, but like, how much is he changing the world in the sense of like, when you think about it, Elon Musk has made Tesla. Tesla is very environmentally friendly. Warren Buffett is investing in companies. And it's not always for Warren, or I don't know if it's ever for Warren Buffett, something that he cares about is necessarily making the world a better place, but more just making his company have good investments, right? I mean, he invests a lot in Coke. I don't think Coke is making the world a better place. It makes it a tastier place, but maybe not a more healthy place. But that being said, I guess my point is, I like Elon Musk. I think he's a really, really special entrepreneur he's like the Thomas Edison of our day and age, in my opinion. But that being said, let me go back to what has been concerning me as of recent. For those of you who don't really follow him that much, I'll go over some highlights as of recent. He purchased Twitter. He runs Tesla. He runs SpaceX. He has Neuralink, which, if you don't know, is basically a brain chip that the goal of it is to be able to control eventually your nervous system, to be able to communicate with people telepathically, as well as be able to, like, I don't want to say like necessarily move things with your brain, but like you'll be able to play video games with just your mind. It's a very interesting technology. It's going to sync humans to computers, like in your brain. It's nuts. It's sci-fi stuff. He's creating literally life-size robots that will be able to perform tasks humans can perform. He's got his own AI with Grok AI. And I guess my thing is, recently he's considering purchasing MSNBC, which is a legacy media company. And that in itself may not be a needle mover, but to me, it kind of opens up a can of worms. So I'm thinking, So on the private side, he is the richest man in the world and has a lot of influence because he has direct influence over the world through Twitter. Like the whole world uses Twitter, and he has direct influence in those algorithms. And I'm not saying he's doing anything shady with that per se, but I'm just stating the fact. He has a lot of influence through Twitter. He has a lot of influence in the way people drive, right? He is creating cars that are basically run on computers. And he has access to all these things. I'm not saying he's going to do anything nefarious with that, but I'm just stating the fact. He is, I don't know if the SpaceX thing is anything in particular, but he's trying to put brain chips in people. For if that's going over anybody's head, like that's kind of scary. You're literally putting a computer in someone's brain. I'm not going to do it personally, but I could see a lot of people, once it's much better integrated with humans, I could see it becoming very popular. We're all addicted to our phones. If we could put the phone in our brain, I think people would do it. I don't think I would do it, but I could see like Gen Z or Gen X wanting to do that. So he has all of these interests in the private sphere and through social media and potentially legacy media. And then on top of that, now he's going to be helping run a government agency that's going to be, in his opinion, getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, right? And I guess that in itself, some people can say it's a conflict of interest, because in theory, he could be getting rid of government agencies that regulate his businesses, right? So in some ways, one could argue that he could be going for a monopoly. And it wouldn't be the first time in history that a very wealthy person is able to basically bend the government to their will. Another thing that I guess has made me a little bit, I don't know if he should be doing that, is I've been seeing reports, and now he's also negotiating on behalf of the United States on peace deals across the globe. And here's the thing. If he's creating peace, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but it's a lot of power to have as a single man who wasn't elected. to now be also representing the world in foreign matters. So he's representing the world he's representing the world in foreign matters. He's running a government agency that could, in a sense, deregulate his own private companies. He owns a social media company that has arguably as much influence as Instagram, Facebook, or some could even say YouTube. He's creating brain chips. It seems as though if he wanted to be a villain, I'm not saying he is a villain, I'm saying if he wanted to become one, he could very quickly, I don't want to say take over the world, but like influence the world in a bad direction. And people change dramatically. It's not the first time, right? Like look at Mark Cuban. He was very much a capitalist, very much a right-wing guy, and then very recently went far left. Like people change. Sometimes they change in their older years, some they change in their younger years. I don't know if Elon Musk is going to drastically change. My thing is, it's a lot of power. He is the richest man in the world. And as well as right now, I would say outside of the president, the most politically influential. And he has the biggest microphone in the world in terms of Twitter, in my opinion, for just a single person. And then he's going to purchase MSNBC. A lot of power. And I guess it disturbs me a little bit how much he's getting off of this election. People say it all the time. The winners get the spoils. And like, he was already spoiled in the sense of like, he already had so much influence and so much money. And now he has the political influence now too. Little scary. If he ends up turning into a person who is very, very corrupt, this could be bad for America as well as bad for the world. I don't know. Some things I was thinking about as I've been seeing the turn of events recently.
I think you have been someone who has followed Elon Musk a lot closer than I have over the years. So I've always kind of listened to what you've said in regards to what he's working on or what he's focusing on and trying to see in the direction he's going. So he does seem like an individual who has hands in a lot of pieces of the pie. And I think that when you're thinking about any individual, that's the whole point of how we've structured things in America, is that we really wanted to create a country where no single individual was too powerful. That's why we got away from monarchies and why we got away from emperors and why we became a democracy, because I think we really wanted to be a country where we are run by the people for the people. And I think that whenever you're looking at any individual, whether it's your president or your wealthy elites or, a military leader, the whole point of our structure of our country is to have the separation of duties. You do that so that no single individual has too much access to too many critical pieces of the infrastructure so that they can become over influential in our society. And we live in a time where we have a class of billionaires who have significant influence over many different components of our society. And we've tried to avoid monopolies to the best of our ability, but I think there's something almost inevitable about whenever you're having emerging technologies or you're having different components of, our economy, there are going to be people of influence who have a disproportional influence on that category. And like I said, I think that's somewhat inevitable. I think the risk is when one individual starts getting disproportionate influence in many different areas. That's where I get a little bit worried. And I think Elon Musk has gotten to the point where he does have a disproportionate influence on many different segments of our system. And it's like most people couldn't, I think we haven't really dealt with it too much because most people just couldn't do it. Part of what makes him so unique is that he's running 10 different companies in 10 different industries, and those 10 different companies are leading the way in those industries. It's absolutely incredible what he's doing. The problem is does he continue to have, or has he always had, an altruistic thought process behind it where it really is trying to push us to the forefront of what's the best for society? Or is there a level of kind of manipulation that's coming from that and we don't even realize it? So I haven't seen anything yet that's made me say, oh my God, put the brakes on this. This is really bad. But at the same time, if it was up to me and I was just creating a system in place, I don't think I'd want any single individual to have as much power and influence as Elon Musk. Not that it's anything a statement against Elon Musk. I just don't like the concept of any one individual being that influential in our society. That's kind of I don't need to speak on it as much as you. I agree with kind of a lot of what you said. And time will tell kind of when you give people power. And this doesn't matter if you're a politician or a wealthy person or whatever the case is. Power is the one thing in this world where people, for some reason, once they get it, they never want to relinquish it. And that's why I think what makes America so great is that we have a system where you can't be a king for forever, and you got your 2 terms as president and you're out. I think that's one of the problems with Congress, is that we have a Congress that doesn't have an end to their reign, and that's why you see these lifelonger politicians, and I think we should actually put caps on them, and we should have term limits, because these people clearly are going until literally, not figuratively, literally their dying days where they're mentally or physically not capable to do the job and they're still there. And I think the same thing can be applied to the private sector as well. You never want someone to have too much power for too long. And the truth of the matter is most people don't give away power freely. So when you have a person who has too much power and we don't have a system of kind of keeping them in check, that's where the danger begins.
Yeah, agreed. Listen, it's the age-old tale of the Lord of the Rings, right? Once you get that ring of power, you never want to give it up. Everybody who had the ring wanted to keep the ring. Nobody wanted to let it go. It was very hard for that ring to get into that volcano. You know?
I agree. There was a lot of metaphor in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And very reflective of the real world.
Listen, once you put that ring on, you go invisible. You don't want to take the ring off.
We don't want to get started on Lord of the Rings. This would be a 6-hour podcast. Anything else on Elon Musk? I generally agree with you. I think that, it'll be, we're gonna look back in 10, 15 years and we're either gonna say, wow, that guy was someone who really was so important and like the best human to have lived. Or we're all gonna be like, yo, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
Why did we let him do all of this stuff?
Yeah. I think the other thing, and I don't know if this is foreshadowing, I remember watching him on a podcast and he was like, my one concern is AI and like robots taking over the world and AI killing us. And now he's like gung-ho into AI. He's literally creating robots. And I'm like, I thought you said you were afraid of it. And he has said many times, oh, it's inevitable, so now I'm just going for it. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go about all of this. Like, people have gone back and forth on whether AI is going to kill us. And my thing is, and we've talked about this, is it necessary to go full throttle into AI knowing there's a solid risk that it kills all of us? I don't know.
Also, I'm just throwing this out there. You didn't talk about the SpaceX very much. One could argue he has the most powerful tool in the world with that. He has the greatest space system we have. He has the best space shuttles in the world and jets and essentially missiles. Talk about, I don't even want to allude to this, but talk about if he wanted to do something nefarious. He is the greatest interspace human on Earth. If he ever decided he wanted to use those for nefarious purposes, he has better rockets. He has the best rockets in the world. He has better rockets than any individual country. He has more satellites in the sky than governments.
Yeah.
He has his own telecommunication system.
I would also say he's said many times he's very pro-human. And I would say some things he does definitely like makes it perceivable that he is. But then other things I'm like, how pro-human is that? I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, on the one hand, he wants to get rid of fraud, abuse, and waste in the government. and that'll help with the deficit. But on the other hand, he's going to cut a lot of jobs doing that. So a lot of people are going to be unemployed. Okay, whatever. He's also creating robots that are going to take a lot of jobs. That could take a lot of jobs. If those robots get to the point where they can just replace factory workers, I know Trump, one thing he talked about is bringing factory work back to U.S. Is it going to matter if we're just replacing all those jobs with robots? And that's one thing he said. He wants to start creating factories full of robots. So my thought is, okay, that's cool for your bottom line, but what about humans? Is he going to share that with the employee? I mean, it's just, it's a very replaceable thing. And the last thing I'll say on this is, there's going to be, from my understanding, self-driving Teslas for people on their personal use, but he's also going to have self-driving Tesla taxis. Who's making money on that? Tesla? Which is good for him. But as I'm saying, like, these things, I don't know if they benefit humanity per se. Because then we have to start discussing more and more universal basic income, which I don't think is good for people in the sense of like, it's going to be something the government has to pay out, as well as I think people need jobs. They need a purpose. If we get completely, I mean, everyone talks about it. We're in real estate. We talked about like, is AI going to take the realtor profession? I don't think so, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But there are a lot of jobs that it's like, okay, if robots and AI can get good enough, they will take those jobs. They will take those jobs eventually. And my thing is, he's really speeding up that process. There's not going to be a lot of time for people to adjust. Even things like, and we've talked about this, like software developers. Software developers, like 10 to 15 years ago, that was the rage. Oh, you learn software development, you're going to be set. Well, all those people are now getting replaced by ChatGPT. They're not all getting replaced, but it's starting to become a thing. Software development is starting to become less of a valuable skill as it was before. Part of it is because now there's an oversaturation of that in the workforce. But the other part is AI is able to code sometimes almost as good as a human and sometimes better. So don't know if Elon is as pro-human as he says he is. Because he hasn't, I get it, he's solving a lot of problems, but he's creating new ones online. And I haven't heard the way he's going to solve those problems.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and he may be pro-human, but he's not pro-human employment. I would say that. I don't think he's the unemployment metric. I don't think is his biggest driving factor. But that's all I got. I agree with you generally. I mean, we will see. Like I said, in a few years. Anything else on Elon Musk?
No, I think I'm good on Elon.
Okay. One other topic we were going to talk about, which I think is a bit more of a sensitive topic, but is also more of a escalating topic in a lot of ways, is we're actually not that far off from the 2-year mark of the Ukraine-Russia war. And it's kind of been something that was, when it happened, I'll never forget the day it happened. We were watching it on news like it was going to be a 3-day takeover of a country. We all thought it was going to be over in a week. And now we're 2 years down the line almost. And, things have developed. Things have definitely changed since the start of it. I think expectations were that it was going to go one way, and things have definitely shifted over time. And now we're in an escalating, drawn-out war. And it seems like the trajectory of it, as of today, November 29th, 2024, is not that it is approaching the end, but has been escalating. I mean, I was going through it and I was trying to think of kind of like summarizing what happened, right? And what I've noticed has happened in the Ukraine war since it started, U.S.-Russia tensions have increased. The U.S. has imposed significant sanctions on Russia financially. The U.S. has continued to work with Ukraine on this, and as of the time of this recording, it's estimated they've donated or given $113 billion in different forms between money, military equipment, humanitarian equipment, all of the above, $113 billion. there hasn't been a significant move one way or the other towards the end of the war. Russia has seemed to have strengthened alliance with some of our enemies, where Russia now is stronger ties with China, stronger ties with North Korea, stronger ties with Iran. We've experienced the significant loss of life, where from a military standpoint, I saw somewhere there's been over 100,000 casualties between both sides. I couldn't even find a good number on how many civilians have died, but I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands. Cities have been desecrated. And when you look at the nearly 2-year mark of a war, I think that personally, the way I look at it, is that we have had a significant number of negative outcomes from this war. And like many wars, not very many positives have come from what's happened to date. So we are now looking at this time where the war seems to be escalating. The U.S. has ramped up their support of Ukraine throughout it, where they started with saying we were only giving, if you remember, initially it was only ammunitions. Then it was only defensive weaponry. Then it was they sanctioned the use of more advanced military equipment. They allowed military fighting aircraft to be donated to Ukraine. And then as of November, they authorized the use of U.S. equipment to be shot and fired into Russian lands. And as of kind of my vantage point, and I'll say this, I'm not an expert. I'm not in the military. I don't know all of the ins and outs of what's going on, so I'll give that preface at the front. But as an average, everyday American citizen, I'm looking at this war right now, and I'm saying it seems like there's been a lot of negative outcomes. It seems like it's escalating, and it seems like as of right now, we have just authorized missiles to be shot into Russia. And I was trying to think about this, and I am in no way, shape, or form a sympathizer of Russia. But at the same time, I was trying to think about this objectively, and I was saying, okay, what if the roles were reversed in this situation? And not that it's an exact one-to-one, but let's just say our neighboring country, like Russia's neighboring country, which is, call it Mexico. Mexico started firing missiles into the U.S. How do you think America would react if Mexico fired one missile into our country? We wouldn't even consider the thought of something like that being proposed on us. And then to make matters worse, what if it was China or what if it was Russia that was supplying those missiles to Mexico to shoot into the U.S.? How do you think we'd react to something like this? And again, I'm not a sympathizer of Russia. I'm just trying to understand what's happening and why things are getting worse. And when I see the U.S. authorizing U.S. missiles to be provided to Ukraine and then shot into Russia, I don't see that as an action that is bringing us closer to the end of the war. And if that's everyone's goal here, and I was thinking about this as well, and I was saying, well, let's actually look at this and say, what are the goals of each country? Because in my mind, whether you're negotiating over a business deal or whether you're negotiating over the end of the war, you need to know what every group's priority is to broker some sort of a resolution at the end. And it seems like, again, I'm not an expert, but it seems like Ukraine wants to first and foremost protect their sovereignty. Ukraine wants to, second of all, protect their people. And third of all, they want to protect their lands. And then what it seems like is that Russia's biggest priority is that there isn't the expansion of NATO into their back door, and that they seem to have some sort of a land grab they're trying to do. They want to expand their footprint into Ukraine. Now, if those are the priorities, right, that's happening, I'm just looking at it and saying, how does the U.S. authorize U.S. missiles to be shot into Russia address anyone's priorities in this war? To me, that is just a blatant escalation of something that we should be trying to find the resolution for. Nobody out here wants wars. No one wants hundreds of thousands of people being killed and countries and cities being desecrated. The U.S. should be playing the role of mediator in this and saying, if we have a role in this at all, our role is to try to de-escalate and get it so that this war stops. And I'm just looking at the current, again, November 29th, 2024, steps the U.S. has taken, and I'm looking around and I'm saying, if you go back to the start of the war in 2022, we haven't done at all what we said our limits were on this war. We have continuously push the goalpost down the line to say we're getting more and more involved and we're doing more and more money and we're more and more bringing us to a place where I'm just wondering, how are these groups now supposed to react? How have we cooled the temperature in the room so that Russia and Ukraine can sit across the table and figure out how to end this thing? Because isn't that everyone's goal? Isn't the goal of Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. that this war is over soon? No one wants this. We need to take a stance of how are we strategically putting ourselves, as well as these two countries, in the best position to end this war. And I don't see firing missiles from the U.S. into Russia as a step that Vladimir Putin nor the Russians are going to see as a de-escalating action. And I think we all need to look around and say, who is authorizing this and why? We're not the military. We don't know the ins and outs of everything, but I think there are some things that are so straightforward enough that we can all kind of look at them and say, hey, you do know that the U.S. population doesn't want wars. Are you guys acting in accordance with the U.S.'s desire? It's like the same thing with Congress. Congress and the military get to seem almost these days, Congress and the military are going rogue. You get elected in or you get promoted in the military, and then you do whatever you want. Both groups need to be accountable to the U.S. population and what our desires are as a people. You don't just get to do whatever you want because you think it's best. If the U.S. isn't looking for war, we shouldn't be going to war. Like, both of those groups are who I'm looking at right now and saying, you are not following the people's desires, and you're not doing what I would say are actions that bring us closer to the end of wars. We just finished Afghanistan, and then literally months later, Ukraine starts, and we're 2 years down the line. The U.S. has been perpetually in hot wars or proxy wars. It's either a hot war or a proxy war since I've been a child. And it's like, man, don't you think it's time for us to kind of cool the temperature, find a resolution, get some amazing negotiators in the room, and find out how we end this thing? I think that over time, and I guess the last thing I'll say is, over time, I have seen the U.S. take a more involved, aggressive stance on this war, and I think that that has not resulted in the quicker remediation or end of the war. So whatever strategy we've been using to date does not seem to me like something that could or should have been ended much quicker than we are. And we're almost at the 2-year mark, and it seems worse today than the day it started. And that to me is a sign that we need to sit back, reflect on the actions we've taken, and come up with a new strategy, because the escalating strategy is not working.
Cool. Yeah. I am not with the Ukraine war. I never was with the Ukraine war. I got nothing to add. If you're done, we can move on. That can just be a Tail monologue. We're almost at the end of 2024, and Tail thought we'd have some bold predictions for 2025. So 5 bold predictions for 2025 by Miguel and Tail. So Tail, do you want to do
go
yours?
ahead. I just got done with it.
Okay. My bold predictions for 2025. Top 5 bold predictions for 2025. Number 1, Dogecoin will reach $1 in 2025. I think the government's going to pump some money into crypto. I think some of it will go Bitcoin. I think some of it will go to probably Ethereum. And I think they'll pump some into Doge. Why? They named a government agency after Doge. Just a hunch. Number 2, I think the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, will close 0 government agencies in 2025. I think there'll be a lot of hoopla. I think there'll be a lot of back and forth. I just don't believe it. That's my bold prediction. They will close no agencies. 3, America will start 0 new wars or be involved in 0 new wars, whether directly or in proxy. 4, there will be a spiked increase in gas prices in 2025. And this will be due to a little bit of a tariff war Trump starts. I think he's going to start some tariff war. And I think while he's doing that, there's going to be a delay in oil production and gas production, because there's always going to be delay when new policies are happening. There's a new transition. There's going to be a period where we're not producing as much oil and gas, and we're going to start a tariff war. So in my opinion, I think the gas prices will go up, if not for the whole year, for part of the year, because there's going to be a time of transition. And then 5, I think we will start to have a serious loss of jobs due to AI and robots. Self-driving cars, robots, AI, automation. I think we're going to start having some issues in 2025 with job loss to computers of some sort. Those are my top 5 2025 predictions.
It's an interesting list. I think one of mine is going to... Actually, 2 of ours, I think, relate. But, okay, I'm going to go over it, my next one, and we'll see, and then we can kind of debrief and keep this segment short. But here are my top 5 bold predictions of 2025. Number 1, civilians are going to be able to start going to space just for paying for it. I think that we're going to have some developments in the space sector where everyday citizens, probably the uber wealthy, are going to be able to just pay a ton of money and they're just going to start going to space. And I think, honestly, my bold prediction for beyond that is that's going to just become a new kind of tourist attraction in the future. But in 2025, you'll start seeing your first private citizens going up to space. Number 2, Bitcoin is going to hit $200,000 by the end of the year. I think we have a very cryptocurrency administration coming in, and Bitcoin kind of is the one that is leading the front in terms of what people know and what they're investing in. And I think even though Bitcoin's already had a crazy run recently, 2025, they're going to continue to see some crazy numbers. Number 3, we are going to see the largest cybersecurity hack of all time in 2025. I think as we're looking around in the environment, there is massive vulnerabilities in the cybersecurity space, and there hasn't been as much activity as could have been. And as there's growing tensions between nations, we may not be entering into as many traditional wars, but one country, I don't know who it's going to be, is going to take that first leap into doing a major cyber attack on another country, or maybe it's a private group that does it. I don't know who would do it, but we're just going to see the biggest one of all time in the next year, and it's going to make us all look around and say, wow, we didn't really prepare for that, and it's going to change up a lot of things in the cyber sphere moving forward. Number 4, I think the Federal Reserve is going to cut the interest rates at least 5 times next year. I think that they've been kind of juggling back and forth between balancing the economic conditions as well as inflation. But I think next year, whether it's because of economic factors or political pressures or whatever the case might be, we're going to see a much more aggressive Federal Reserve in terms of cutting interest rates. And a lot of people thought it was going to happen in 2024. I think 2025 is the year you actually see that in practice. And then number 5, the price of oil is going to go below $2 in 2025. The price of oil is going to go below $2.25 by the end of 2025. I think this is where it's interesting. We have absolutely opposite stances. I think that's going to be, on 2 fronts, a very quick thing to happen. 1, the market's going to price in a pro-gasoline-friendly administration. And 2, the actual supply of gasoline from U.S.-based countries is going to dramatically increase over the next year. And they're probably already preparing for that now. And they're trying to implement that as quickly as possible. And I think you're going to see a lot of big oil manufacturers really start cranking out a lot of oil. I think the government's going to start refilling its strategic reserve piles, and I think there's just going to be a lot more oil that is brought into the U.S. over the next year, and because of that, you're going to see a much cheaper price of gasoline. So I think it's interesting that we both didn't talk about that and put gasoline prices on our top 5 bold predictions, because one of us is going to be right and one of us is going to be wrong.
I mean, technically, we could both be right if there's a giant spike in gas, which is what I said I predicted. My prediction specifically was there will be a spiked increase in gas temporarily due to tariff wars during a period of transition of the U.S. becoming a bigger oil producer. So
yeah,
both can happen within a year.
Both could happen. That's one scenario, but mine is kind of saying the price of oil is going to go down. And I think part of the reason that is because the market's going to price it in.
We'll see.
We'll see. It's interesting. We don't always have to agree on everything.
Yeah. And many times we do not.
And I think
that's fine. And that's fine.
America.
Yeah.
We agree to disagree sometimes.
Listen, I'm not going to disown you over this. We can still be friends.
That's nice of you.
Okay. Are we good to wrap this up?
Yes, sir.
All right. Shout out to Pope.
Shout out to Pope.